part because of the randomness. A good example of this is if you're walking down one of the roads early in the game, you could come across a scene. It's one that we showed in Crafting Sanctuary panel earlier, where a bunch of zombies come into the ground and you kill them. And it's a pretty cool fight, but it's going to take you probably less than a minute to do. That same scene could be a 20-minute dungeon, you know, next time you roll it. So it's dramatically scalable according to the random elements you come across, let alone the playstyles. It's really hard to say. It depends what you roll.
Thank you.
So I'm curious if you considered any support for Grails. It was kind of popular in D2 to keep track of all the unique and set items that you personally found. So I'm hoping D3 will offer an automatic way to like keep track of that sort of thing.
Maybe. Don't know yet, to be honest with you. But I tell you what, I will put it on my list of things to look at and consider.
Hey guys, my question was about since PvE and PvP are so separate now, if there was going to be a way that since in PvE you would want a completely separate spec for killing monsters than you would in PvP, if those would be like maybe a function like dual spec or something like that.
So we haven't decided about that yet, primarily because there's a lot of things that drove the desire for dual specking in World of Warcraft, which is, I believe, where the request comes from. And a lot of it was that there were a lot of different things that pulled a WoW character in a lot of different directions. Like, you had to have the perfect PvE spec if you were raiding. But if you always also wanted to PvP, then you also had to have a different spec. For Diablo, a PvP spec is still a decent, it's almost always focused on damage, at least partially. And as a result of that, it's never a terrible PvE spec either. So the need to kind of manage multiple specs per character may not be necessary. I'm not saying that we wouldn't do it. I'm saying that we don't want to add it unless we need it, because we want to get it to you guys as quickly as possible. So we really analyze each feature to see if we actually do need it. And the other factor to consider there too is that Diablo characters tend to be more, I don't want to use that word, that's negative. Well, I'm going to use it anyway, disposable. You tend to make a lot more Diablo characters than you make a WoW character. So that's a question we have too, is do we need to have dual specs, or would people just build a PvP character and a PvE character? And you know, we're not sure about that. So once we're sure, if we definitely see a need for dual specking, then we'll add it.
Thank you.
Hey guys, I just wanted to know if you guys were thinking anything about how to function with the world. I know you said that you didn't really have anything on the trade aspect, or how you were going to function with people dealing with each other, and that the trade chat was terrible or not awesome. Do you have any idea about players interacting with other players outside of the PvE experience, like actually going out and questing or anything of that nature?
Yeah, we have a trade system in the game now. It's actually disabled on the floor, but and it allows for you to trade objects and I think money with other players if you want. So and it's basically just a typical, you know, you put your stuff on one side, they put their stuff on the other, you both say okay, and it swaps the items. Of course, you can always just throw things on the ground. And one of the things that we find when we're playing together is that when people's bags fill up, if they, a little bit less now since salvage came in, but especially if they find something that they think, oh, this will be good for my friend, a lot of the times they'll just run by them and toss it on the ground because they'll see it. And, you know, people are like, anything shiny hits the ground, and they just naturally vacuum it up. That's actually the quickest way.
Thank you.
Hello, just a quick lore question. Do both genders of each class have the same backstory, and if so, does that include the barbarian?
It's interesting you mentioned the barbarian, because that's the only one that doesn't have the same backstory, because the male barbarian is the same barbarian from D2, but the female is a younger version. So she obviously isn't the bald barbarian from Diablo 2.
So every other gender is identical for the other classes?
Yes, yeah.
Thank you.
Having played everything from the Lost Vikings through 100,000 hours of World of Warcraft Arena, I hate to have to change my question because you said it, but the way I interpreted another answer that you guys had put forth is that you plan to not support competitive play because you feel that to do so you would have to deteriorate the essence of the fun of the game. And I know that as a company you have always been about the fun of the game, and that's why I've played everything through, the Lost Vikings to 100,000 hours of WoW, but I never would have played 100,000 hours of WoW if there was never the need to get better. And I feel like you guys, since, you turned StarCraft into a nation's esport through its balance, I feel like if anyone's capable of balancing competitive PvP, I'd like to have the crowd roar for me right now because I think you guys can do it. And I don't want to have to change the fundamentals of anything else you've done because you've made every improvement to Diablo 3 that I would have made myself, but the one thing that I don't want to see you do is drop competitive play. So if everybody loves Blizzard and agrees with me, will you guys support it? Based on the community at BlizzCon and based on my question, will you support competitive play even though you said you wouldn't?
I think there's your answer.
Well, actually, I think based on that, I could say if BlizzCon demanded it, then I would, but apparently BlizzCon doesn't demand it. But so I can tell you that you're right. Blizzard knows a lot about balancing games, a lot, enough to know when to give up. I spend a lot of time with this. I'm a big fan of StarCraft before I came to Blizzard, and I play a lot of Star 2, and I talk to those guys a lot, and I know the sacrifices they made to make an esport, and that was okay because that was their game. That was everything they wanted to be. It's not what we want Diablo to be. So we're not, and what it comes down to is we're just not willing to give up what we want Diablo to be in order to make an esport.
I'm still going to love it. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Jay, turning the train wreck around there as a good segue. I've got a question regarding the BattleNet 2 integration, which is obviously going to be a very important part of Diablo 3, like all Blizzard games before it. It's been a few months since we've had the launch of StarCraft 2, and I'm curious to know whether or not you guys have been paying attention to some of the hits and misses of BattleNet 2, specifically things like absence of chat channels, and probably more important for the foreigners watching the show, when you buy the game in a different country, can you play with anyone in the world? Are you sort of stuck in Southeast Asia or North America or Europe? Are you going to play with anyone?
On the chat channels, no one's more disappointed that we don't have those yet than us. Well, maybe some people aren't. Some people are pretty disappointed. We're working on getting chat channels in, and we'll get them in there as soon as we can. And any features like that we put into BattleNet for, say, StarCraft 2, will translate over to Diablo 3. On the different regions, I have to say that I'm somewhat undereducated on the subject, but as I have been, from what I understand, there's no plans right now to make the regions cross-communicate.
Thank you. Thank you. We've got time for a couple more.
Hi. So last year you mentioned that there's going to be the hardcore mode. This year you're doing the PvP arenas. Are we going to see a hardcore PvP arena?
Yeah, we answered that. If you go hardcore and you go into the arena, you'll die.
Awesome.
Thank you. Come on up.
Hi. Not another PvP question though. This is regarding the end game. So in Diablo 2, we like to farm a lot, and we had to make tons and tons of mules in the late game because we wanted to keep everything. And you guys kind of fixed the Tetris problem with the looting, but it's still not alleviated. So how are you guys going to handle like us having tons and tons of mules? I don't expect you guys to make us buy like so many CD keys of Diablo 3. That would be bad. And really expensive.
So I'm gonna translate what I think you're asking. I think you're asking two questions. Yeah. One is the stash going to be bigger? I think that's one of the questions. And the other question is probably how many characters can we have? And I referenced that based on the CD key. So we haven't determined the number of characters per account, but because accounts don't work the same as they did before, you know, it's not like you have a CD key and you can make tons and tons of Battle.net accounts. It's you have a CD key and you have your Battle.net account. The number of characters is going to be a lot higher. Exactly what that number is, I can't say, but it's going to be. We're going to try and make it a number that's actually really hard to hit. And yes, go right ahead. So get ready to applaud more, and we're going to make sure that we never delete your characters. So, even if you leave the game and come back. So the other side of the question is the stash is massive. It's very, very, very big. So it's so big. People tell me I think the stash might be too big, and then I hit those people and they are quiet.
Thank you. I think we could squeeze in one more.
Thank you very much. I just want to give a quick shout out to the raid group on Lightbringer, and my question has to do with the stash. Is there any plans on having this stash being able to be shared between characters so you can eliminate muling it completely?
Yes. BlizzCon exclusive, by the way.
You know what? I think we'll squeeze in one more. Come on.
Yeah, I had a question about Diablo. I ran into a problem myself as far as you mentioned all the permutations of all the abilities and such. And if you spread your abilities too thin, you might be setting yourself up for failure. I didn't get to the end of Diablo 2 as far as max level, but I was curious if there's anything in Diablo 3 to assist the player in making decisions that you might currently, for some games, rely on intellectuals to have to make for you. Is there anything going to be able to help you say, well, you know what, you're at this difficulty, you're at the 19th level of hell or whatever, it's probably not a good idea to start picking up these new abilities, build up your current ones, that type.
Yeah, okay, so there's a lot of improvements to being able to make builds, period. As in, it's easier to see your build, to understand your build, to build it without sacrificing any depth. So, number one, there's a lot of UI improvements that make it very easy to make the choices. The abilities are tiered, so you can have fewer, better choices at any given time. There's currently a spending limit at the beginning of the game for every skill. You spend 5 skill points into it, and over the course of the game, you can expand that. So to make a long story short, we're taking choices like that, and we're dragging them out a little bit longer, so you have fewer, better choices to make. When you're making, these builds or respecking or whatever, it's going to be a lot simpler for you to understand it. I'm not sure if I answered all of your question. Was there any part I missed?
Just that I think some of the abilities later on didn't really scale. So if you put a whole bunch of points into them, when you got, I think it was, I played the Necromancer that summoned skeletons, I think. Later in the game, it didn't seem like it was that.
So any given build has 7 skills that you can choose, and then the different levels of depth that you can put skill points into it. So we have fewer, better skills for any given build, and that's going to control the ability for you to spread it too thin. You simply can't spread it too thin. It's very hard to make a bad build with this new system, actually.
Thank you guys very much. Everybody give them a round of applause. Appreciate it.
All right, that wraps up the Diablo 3 open Q&A there with the team. And the fans here at BlizzCon are having fun on day 2. We're wrapping things up. We've only got about 3 hours left before the big closing ceremony. the fans are buying things at all the booths. There's the Razer booth with their mouse and their headsets.